Well, today we're looking at the anatomy of the gastrointestinal tract, what in the old days was called the alimentary canal. And we're going to start at the top with this cross-section of the head here. And we notice the nasal passages. And at the back here, we have the pharynx. Nasopharynx is behind the nose. Oropharynx behind the mouth. And the laryngopharynx down in the area of the larynx. This, of course, is the tongue. We see the upper teeth and the lower teeth in the mandible. This is the maxilla and the lips. And here, this flap here represents the epiglottis folding down over the top of the airway during swallowing. And this passage here is the start of the trachea. But during swallowing, food goes from the mouth down into the start of the food pipe here, and this is the esophagus, the muscular tube that runs through the thoracic cavity, taking the food down to the stomach in the abdominal cavity. And progress of a food bolus down the esophagus is peristaltic, as there's a coordinated wave of contraction in the esophageal muscles. Now, between the stomach here and the esophagus here, there's a sphincter in this area here, and it's called the cardiac sphincter because it's roughly in the area of the heart. The top part of the stomach is the fundus, this area. Then we have the body of the stomach, and this part of the stomach is called the pylorus. And here we have the pyloric sphincter regulating the exit of material from the stomach through into this first part of the small intestine, which is the duodenum. And if I take this cover off, we can see the nature of the inside layer of the stomach, the gastric mucosa. Here we see the cardiac sphincter, the fundus of the stomach at the top, the main part of the stomach here, the body, and the pylorus of the stomach here. And we notice that when it's empty, the inside wall of the stomach is wrinkly. These are the rugae. The rugae are these folds in the lining of the stomach. And of course, when the stomach is full, it will expand. And these rugae allow for expansion. The mucosa is the inside part of the stomach wall. Here, of course, we have the liver on the right-hand side, and this structure on the left here is the spleen. So liver on the right, spleen on the left. One of the functions of the liver is to produce bile, and I'm just going to lean this model forward so you can see underneath a little bit. Here we can see the gallbladder and the bile ducts here. So the bile is produced in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, passing down the bile duct, eventually to drain into the duodenum. I don't know if you can see there, that vein there, is the hepatic portal vein, draining the blood supply from nearly all of the gastrointestinal tract actually, directly into the liver. Here we see the start of the duodenum. Duo is actually the old-fashioned word for 12. And the idea was that the duodenum was about 12 fingers long. It's about 25 centimetres in length. And it's the first part of the small intestine. So all of this we see here are the folds of the small intestine. Now actually, if you dissect a body and you take out the small intestine, it's about 6.5 metres long. But in life it's about 3 metres long because there's muscle tone makes it shorter. And it's in 3 sections, as we've said. The first section is the duodenum, about 25 centimetres long. Then this goes in round all of these folds. This is one long tube, all folded up. The next part is the duodenum, which is about 1 metre long in life. And the final part, the final 2 metres, is the ileum. So duodenum, duodenum and ileum. So protein digestion starts off in the stomach. Now you can see the bile duct coming down here carrying bile. And this organ here is the pancreas. And it's described as an organ with a head, a body and a tail. And throughout the pancreas we can see the pancreatic duct bringing digestive enzymes to deposit into the duodenum along with the bile. The bile will emulsify the fats and the digestive enzymes from the pancreas will digest proteins, carbohydrates and fats, and that process will take place in the duodenum and duodenum. A lot of the absorption takes place in the ileum, which is the lower part of the small intestine. Then, when the material has gone through the small intestine, it's time to go into the large intestine. And we see the large intestine here in grey. Here's the distal part of the ileum going through into the cecum. This area here is the cecum. So this is the ileocecal valve. Ileum cecum valve, regulating the passage of material from the ileum into the cecum. And this is actually the narrowest part of the gastrointestinal tract. If there's obstruction, it can often occur in this area, especially if it's due to something like worms or parasitic infection. Now here we see the veriform appendix. The appendix in the right iliac fossa. Veriform means worm-like. And it's a blind-ended pouch from the cecum. And we notice that the large intestine is in a series of haustra. These folds are called haustra. Haustrum would be a singular fold. It just means pouches. So the whole large intestine, that is the whole colon, the large intestine and the colon are interchangeable terms, are arranged in these haustra. So appendix, cecum, then the material goes up in the ascending colon. And this bend here is in the area of the liver. So that's called the hepatic flexure. A flexure just means a bend. So ascending colon, hepatic flexure, This bit that's going across is the transverse colon, across to the left-hand side. And we can see that this bends again near the spleen. So this bend near the spleen is called the splenic flexure, the bend near the spleen. Then the material goes further down the descending colon, down the left-hand side of the abdomen. But then, of course, the anus and the rectum are towards the back. So this part of the colon takes it back. Here it projects backwards. And this part of the colon which goes back is called the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid colon. And the sigmoid colon terminates in this longer, wider area here called the rectum. Fecal material is stored in here prior to defecation. And finally, we see the muscular ring of the anal sphincter here, controlling the exit of material from the rectum through to the outside world. So we see the gastrointestinal tract is involved in ingestion, taking food in, digestion, breaking food down into simple molecules, prior to the next function, which is absorption, where the nutrients are absorbed into the systemic venous system. Well, first of all, it goes via the hepatic portal vein to the liver, then into the veins, and the fatty material is absorbed into the lymphatic system, into the lacteals initially. So absorption takes place mostly in the small intestine. So we've had ingestion, digestion, absorption, and the final phase, the fecal material prepared by the colon prior to defecation. The final stage is elimination. Ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. And the whole gastrointestinal tract is just one long tube. The thicknesses vary. Here in the stomach it's quite wide. In the small intestine it's more narrow. So the diameter of the tube varies, but it's one long tube. And of course, inside the gastrointestinal tract, it's a very microbial rich area. Lots of bacteria, especially in the colon. So much so that by the time the material becomes feces, about a third of the weight of the material, if you dry it out, of the feces is actually bacteria. So this goes through the thoracic cavity, through the abdominal cavity, then the sigmoid colon and the rectum in the pelvic cavity. So they're the main anatomical structures of the gastrointestinal tract.